Buck has been elected Weld County District Attorney 3 times by large margins. He leads a staff of more than 60 people with strong record of criminal prosecution and crime prevention. Since taking office in 2005, the crime rate in Weld County dropped 50%, one of the best records in the country. Ken is a Christian and a leader in his profession and community. Ken has volunteered and served on the boards of many important community groups. As District Attorney, Ken Buck together, thousands of kids and their families get back on the right path in life. As candidate for the U.S. Senate, Ken calls for a return to conservative principles to rein in the government, cut the massive spending, and pass constitutional balanced budget amendment. Ken's strong, independent voice to reclaim our U.S. Senate seat has been heard, and Coloradans are responding with passion and enthusiasm. Ken's wife, Perry, served as the Vice Chair and Secretary of Colorado Republican Party and is currently a representative in the Colorado House. They live in Windsor, where Perry owns a small business. Ken's son, Cody, graduated from West Point and is a U.S. Army officer. Daughter, Catelyn, is a business executive in Colorado after graduating from Clemson University. Let's all give a welcome to Weld County District Attorney.
Mr. Schaefer asked me to talk about justice, and then he said we'd have some questions and answers afterwards, and I'm assuming he meant that I would be asking some questions and you would be giving me answers. I hope that's the way it works, because I don't have many good answers. But, let's talk about justice for a second. Dr. Martin Luther King said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I have spent my life, the last 25 years of my life, as a prosecutor seeking justice. And it's very hard to define the word justice. I actually worked for the United States Department of Justice for a long time, what seemed like a long time, 15 years. And I can tell you something, folks, the Department of Justice often commits injustice. And that is something that is very hard when you're trying to, and you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you think that you're going to save the world, and you end up working with a group of people who are not seeking justice. But as a prosecutor and as a member of the government is designed to make sure that we protect your constitutional rights and your natural rights. And when the government oversteps those bounds, it often acts in the opposite way. I wanted to tell you a quick story about a young lady, because I think it points out what happens in justice in the prosecution setting. There was a case, maybe 6 or 7 years ago in Johnstown, right off of I-25. And this young lady, 15-year-old girl, Heather, and her dad wasn't living at home. Her mom, most of the time, was not at home, and she started to take on the responsibilities as the mother in the house. And she had a younger sister, Zoe, and she had a boyfriend from Denver. And her mom let her boyfriend move in, which was another mistake. And there was alcohol in the house, which was another mistake. And her boyfriend started watching a video game that was popular at the time called Mortal Kombat. Anybody here ever played Mortal Kombat? I see some adults. I don't see many. because he had been using alcohol and then previously he had been using drugs. And so he decided that he was going to act out the mortal combat on Zoe, this 7-year-old girl. Well, he ended up killing her. He hit her once in the head, once too many times, and Zoe ended up dying at 7 years old. And it was a case that actually received not only national attention, but international attention, because a lot of people were questioning at the time the effect of video games on violence in our society. And so we had that case in my office, and Heather had not stopped her boyfriend from hurting her sister, and Heather actually had participated to a certain extent in the activities. And the case was in our office, and I was faced with the decision of what to do with Heather. And the defense attorneys wanted what defense attorneys always want, and that is very lenient treatment. And there were others in the community that wanted very harsh treatment. And I looked at that case, and I looked at that 15-year-old young lady, and I thought about her circumstances. And really, she was a victim in some ways, because she didn't have an upbringing which gave her a sense of justice and a sense of responsibility. And she didn't go to a school like this, frankly, that teaches that justice and responsibility and other important things. One of the most important things you're learning is that you are responsible for helping others, especially the most vulnerable. And Heather didn't get that sense, either from her parents or from her environment. And we have two systems for juvenile crime in our state. We have a system called the Department of Youth Corrections, and it is a very rehabilitative program with counseling. But she would have probably spent about 3 months in the Department of Youth Corrections after her 7-year-old sister had been killed. And then we have another system called the Youth Offender System. And it starts out with a military boot camp, and it goes into a very, very structured system. And it is designed for young people that are really in terrible need of turning their lives around. And there was some consternation on behalf of the judge, but I made the decision to offer a plea agreement to Heather to give her this time in the youth offender system. And she, not everybody does, but she successfully completed the youth offender system. And the reason I'm telling you the story is yesterday, she sent me, and it was a 6.5-year sentence that she had. But she sent me an email yesterday, and it was very heartwarming. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Buck. A lot of people would have allowed me to go the easier route, but it would not have made a difference in my life. I needed to understand what I did was wrong and how I could change my life for the better. And the youth offender system gave me that opportunity. And I feel like I am mature beyond my years now, and I am ready to deal with life." She wants to, one of the saddest things in this whole story is that the ashes of her younger sister Zoe are still sitting on the shelf. She has not had a proper burial. And one of the things that Heather said is, "I want to make sure my sister has a proper burial, and I want to." There are 2 younger twins in the family also, and I want to try to take care of those 2 twins. So she has really grown as a person, and that is one of the things that prosecutors do in seeking justice, is not only make sure that people are punished for their wrongdoing so that others don't do wrong, but make sure that people are rehabilitated and are given a second chance. And I wish Heather were standing here next to me, because I think she has the best definition of justice. She was both punished and rehabilitated, and she is ready for the world. And I think that this education that you're getting, not just in math and in science and the arts, but understanding what justice is so important. So, having said that, are there any questions that I can answer? Or how do we do this? Would you like to? 10 minutes for questions? Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am. What happened to the boyfriend? When I looked at the case, I saw that Heather was much less of a threat to our community than the boyfriend, and that she was much more is still in prison. Yes?
What kinds of cases do you get most commonly?
What's the most common case?
Yeah.
Well, we have two kinds of cases in the DA's office. We have felonies and we have misdemeanors. And most of our misdemeanor cases involve cars, so drunk driving or other car-related kinds of crimes. The felonies in Weld County typically involve some type of property crime. So either a theft or a robbery or a crime like that. Now, I can tell you there have been studies in prisons that have been done, and it's certainly my experience in Weld County, and I would think that Cliff Rito's experience here in Larimer County. Over 80% of the criminal cases that we have in the criminal justice system, and this is true across the country, are caused by people who are using serious drugs. They are either on methamphetamine or heroin or a drug like that, a very addictive drug. And they typically started with cigarettes, and they graduated to alcohol, and they graduated to marijuana, and they went on from there to the more serious drugs. But those drug addicts are the people who typically commit the robberies, commit the other serious crimes that we have in our community. And we don't put them in prison because they're using methamphetamine or using heroin. We put them in prison because they put a gun in someone's face and demanded money. They were that desperate to get money to buy more drugs. Come on, this is an uplifting talk. Yes, sir.
And you said Heather also took part in the act of the reenactment of the game. And was she also under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or was she being pushed to do this by her boyfriend?
Both, yes. She was under the influence of the alcohol, and she didn't. The boyfriend used marijuana. She didn't use marijuana, but the boyfriend was physically pushing her into doing the acts, the assaults. Now, she wasn't involved in any of the serious damage that was done to Zoe that led to the death, but she did help the boyfriend after the fact cover up the crime. She lied to police. She helped in destroying some of the evidence, and so that's a crime also. When you may have nothing to do with the crime. In fact, there was a double homicide in Weld County just last week, and we are prosecuting, filing charges today against people who, after the fact, helped the criminal dispose of evidence or conceal what happened. Yes, sir.
How do you deal with things like this that you see every day and remain positive?
I don't. I'm a very, very sour person. So. You know, it's a great question because my wife has asked me that question for 15, 18 years now. And what happens to people, you know, surgeons who have to operate on people and have to, you know, repair damage and open up a body to repair damage. You develop, or I developed, a filter, and other people develop a filter. Police officers develop a filter in what we see every day. And then before we go home and try to be a loving husband, a loving father, we've got to take that filter and get rid of it so that we can open up and actually have emotions. But it's a great question because you have to shut down your emotions. My son is in the Army, and if he were to go to combat, he would have to shut down his emotions and follow the training that he received to be able to kill another person. He obviously was raised not to do that, but in combat, that's what's required, that's what he'll do. And we all have those filters in various parts of our life. The key is to be able to get rid of that filter and still have a normal life with your family. Yes, sir.
So is the use of that a term
people go into military service? Because you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. It starts with a boot camp, and it does not involve mandatory service. Most of these young people, someone goes into what we call YOS when they are convicted of a felony as an adult. So Heather, for the rest of her life, will be a convicted felon. And convicted felons cannot serve in the military. So there is no connection between the military-style boot camp that they have at YOS and potential military service afterwards. Yes?
What is your ideas on video games causing true violence?
What are my ideas on video games causing violence? Let me tell you, I think our country has moved away from some basic ideas, and we have moved into an area that has really opened up bad influences on people. And I don't blame video games alone, but and my kids didn't play those kinds of video games. But the other thing I think is music. I hear some music out there, and it talks about harming women, or it talks about shooting police officers, or it talks about other things like that. And I think if you are surrounded constantly by bad influences, you are going to ultimately end up thinking that bad is good. I can tell you one quick answer, because I know we're running out of that. My son was recruited to play football at the Air Force Academy. And we sat down with a coach, Fisher DeBerry, who was a legendary coach at the Air Force Academy. And Fisher DeBerry told my son something that I think is just absolutely true and very insightful. And what he said was, if you come to the Air Force Academy and play football, you will be surrounded by good people, and that will have an influence on you to do good. And I think that is true in any situation. If you find some people that are doing bad and you hang around with them long enough, you're going to do bad. If you play video games that are constantly violent, you're going to think violence is normal. If you listen to that kind of music, you're going to think those things are normal. And so I think one of the keys as a parent is to make sure that my kids understood that those influences would ultimately have an effect on them. I love having people ask questions up here because I can hear you. I'm going to take one here and then I'll go over there. Yes, sir. Do I think that the boyfriend would have killed Zoe if he wasn't drunk or high? No, I don't. I think he would have used more responsible actions and realized that he was causing pain, because she was obviously crying, and he was asking for help and asking him to stop, and it didn't register with him because his brain had been muddled by those drugs. Question over here, yes?
How long did you attend law school?
It takes 3 years to go through law school. I went on a 7-year plan. I went to law school for 3 years. All right, I'll take a risk back there, but speak up. As the district attorney, I've tried a few cases. I tried a double homicide case that happened just off of I-25 near Berthoud. And I tried a case that was fascinating because I played football, as did your principal, Mr. Schaefer. I don't know if you know that he was a world-renowned football player on the cover of Sports Illustrated. But, he actually, someday you'll have to ask him, and he'll have to tell you about the high school he went to, because it was a high school that I was very well aware of. When I was in high school, it was a national championship high school, and the coach actually went on to coach Notre Dame. But I forget your question. That's terrible. No, it's a good question. Tell me again. Oh, in the courtroom or not? Yes. So the other case that I tried was a case involving a football player at the University of Northern Colorado. He was a punter, and he was a second-string punter, and he wanted to become the first-string punter. And his mother was convinced that he was an all-pro punter, and the only thing stopping him was the coach's love for this first-string punter. And so he stabbed the first-string punter. He took a knife jumped him in a parking lot at night in the dark and stabbed the first string runner. And so, just because of the football connection and other things, I decided to prosecute that case. And he also went to the state prison and is out now, has moved to Texas. So the football players in Colorado are safe. The football players in Texas are not as safe. But so as district attorney, I tried cases for the first 15 years as a prosecutor, and then when I was elected district attorney, I run the office and I serve more as a mentor to the other attorneys who are trying cases. I'll take one more question. Yes, sir.
Okay. How has your office reacted to the recent legalization of marijuana in Colorado?
How has my office reacted to the legalization of marijuana? I can take that question in a few different ways. Nobody in my office is allowed to smoke marijuana. It may be legal for everybody else. It's not legal for the Denver Broncos, although you couldn't tell in the Super Bowl that it wasn't legal. Other kids always made fun of him because he had a stutter. And when we got off the bus, actually it was his bus stop, not mine, there were 3 other kids that got off at his bus stop and were going to beat him up. And I had just because he had a stutter. And I had one of those times where I had to make a decision. I was a bigger kid. I was a stronger kid. Willie was not. And Willie would have just stood there and let him punch him. He was not a kid that was going to fight back. And so I had to define justice at that very minute. What was justice for me? What was my role? I mean, this is just another kid. He wasn't in my family. I didn't have any moral obligation to help him, did I? Well, I got off the bus also. And I won't tell you the details because I don't want to talk about violence and video games and those things, but Willie walked home just fine and the other 3 kids did not. But justice isn't an obligation only of police officers or prosecutors or those in law enforcement. Justice is something that we all are obliged. And it's what Martin Luther King said. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We have an obligation to make sure that we help those who are more vulnerable. And reason I want to go to D.C. is because the vulnerable are the folks that are really going to lose out if we don't change, in my belief, some of the government policies that we have right now. And it is absolutely essential that as you grow, you find that area of justice that you can help out in. And it may be, and I wouldn't recommend the Willie Bunch scenario, but it may be that your justice is not in law enforcement, but it could be in nursing, it could be as a social worker, it could be in all kinds of different areas. But justice is one of those lofty goals that in the end, I can say to my kids, to my grandkids, if my kids ever have grandkids, I hope they do very quickly. I can say to my kids and my grandkids, after they get married, I can say to my kids and my grandkids, you know what, I spent my life doing justice. I wake up every day knowing I get to do the right thing. I get to do the right thing. And that's not something a lot of people get to say. And so that's my view of justice. It's my view of our obligation to do justice in our lifetime.
And can we give him another round of applause?
Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Mr. Buck. Appreciate your remarks and presentation. One quick set of introductions. As many of you have read in our newsletters, and you've seen us talk about it throughout the school, we've got we're forming a sister school relationship, a partnership with a school in Seoul, Korea. And there are 4 students who are from that school. They're here with us today. They've been adopted by four of the houses. They're from Gaesong School in Seoul. It's a girls' school, Catholic school. And so please stand up, ladies, when I introduce you, and we'll all say hello. Hey, Jen is here. Say Jen. Young.
Capstone Award.
So as you know, the Foundation Stone Award goes to a truly exemplary student from the junior high school who exemplifies at least 3, if not more, of our capstones here at Liberty County School. And so I want to tell you something about the student who received the award today. This fine young gentleman exemplifies, first and foremost and most obviously, gratitude. He is always, always one of the most thankful students I've ever been graced to have in my classroom. He's always interested in having a conversation for maybe a couple seconds, maybe a couple minutes right after class. He's always engaged, he's always interested, who I always feel thankful that I'm able to teach him, and he always makes it known that he's thankful to be a part of my classroom and part of this school. This fine young gentleman also exemplifies fortitude. He is an example to his peers in how he is bold, but not brash. He is kind, but not cowardly. He is a gracious, polite leader to his peers. He is extraordinary. This fine young gentleman finally also exemplifies patriotism. If we consider patriotism in what it really stands for universally, it stands for giving back something to your community, right? Actually standing up for your community and contributing to your community. If that's the true spirit of patriotism, then this student may be one of the most patriotic people I have the pleasure to know. He is a leader to his peers. He exemplifies a spirit of curiosity that all of us here cannot help